and play on 2nd and 10. That's his youth right there.
Tagovailoa trying to make up for it. Fires to the end zone. Touchdown! Alabama wins!
So today I'll be reacting to week 12 of the 2025 college football season. So Texas's season is over, getting blown out by Georgia at 35-10. Because even if they were to beat Texas A&M, which they won't do unless Texas A&M were to play like they did in the first half against South Carolina, Texas has 3 losses. And this Texas team isn't deserving of a playoff spot anyway. There's such a huge disappointment, both offensively and defensively. Arch Manning went back to his normal terrible self after having a few good games, averaging just 5.8 yards per throw. And as usual, Texas had no run game. They ran 17 times for just 23 yards. Georgia's defensive line dominated them like they did both times that they played each other last season. Texas's offensive line gave up 3 sacks to a pass rush that hasn't even been that good. Georgia, they played their best game of the season, which is interesting because they also played their best game of the season last year against Texas in the regular season. It's strange how Texas played Ohio State so close. It must have been because Julian Sayin and Arch Manning both weren't very good quarterbacks at the beginning of the season, and Sayin improved a lot while Manning didn't improve any because Julian Sayin is now a Heisman candidate, but Ohio State does seem to be better than Georgia is, at least defensively. But bad news for Georgia is even though they won and Alabama lost, Alabama is still in great shape to go to the SEC championship because even though Alabama now has 2 losses and Georgia only has one, only one of Alabama's losses is a conference loss, and it only matters about the conference record. And even though Oklahoma is 8-2 also with a win over Alabama, they have 2 conference losses. So if A&M beats Texas and Alabama beats Auburn, it's going to be Alabama and Texas A&M in the SEC championship. But Georgia is likely going to either get a first round bye or get a home playoff game because they're likely going 11 and 1 because while Georgia Tech was looking like a team that would have a chance to beat them, the way Georgia Tech has played in their last 2 games, losing to a terrible NC State team and almost losing to a one-win Boston College team, Georgia would blow them out. But Texas A&M in the first half against South Carolina looked like a completely different team than the team that had played the rest of the season before that. And Marcel Reed, that was his worst half of football of the season, throwing 2 interceptions and being very inaccurate passing, very unlike his usual self. And Texas A&M's defense was terrible in the first half of that game too. Now, Lenora Sellers is a good quarterback, so it's not surprising that he was able to make some good throws on them. And that wide receiver that for South Carolina, Nick Harbor, that had the 80-yard touchdown catch, he's as fast a football player as you're going to find. But what was surprising was the Texas A&M defensive line in the first half was getting dominated by the SEC's worst offensive line, an A&M defensive line that's been elite. But in the second half, Texas A&M played the complete opposite. They dominated the line of scrimmage on both sides, and Marcel Reed played a pretty much perfect second half. He still ended up having a huge game of 439 yards passing and three touchdown passes. But Texas A&M was the first ever SEC team to come back from 27 points behind. And Alabama probably should have beat Oklahoma if you look at yards because they outgained Oklahoma 406 to 212. And Ty Simpson, I thought played really well, completing 66.7% of his passes and throwing for 326 and averaging 7.8 a throw. And while the secondary is not the elite part of the Oklahoma defense, if you can throw for 300 and more yards against anybody, you've played really well. But Oklahoma's offense was almost non-existent in this game. It was the three turnovers by Alabama that made the difference. Oklahoma really only got 13 points offensively because one of the touchdowns by Oklahoma was a pick six.
So
Yeah, that
I
was
think they got
close
it right.
too. Because if it were, oh, there's an interception on the first play thereafter. Eli Bowen down the sideline. He may go. Ty Simpson back there. Can't tackle him. Touchdown, Eli Bowen.
And one of the field goals they got was because of a turnover that put them in field goal range. And then the one offensive touchdown they got was because of a fumble on a punt return by Ryan Williams that gave them really good field position. But you can say that Alabama would have won had they not had those turnovers. But they did have those turnovers, and you have to credit Oklahoma for forcing those turnovers. Because it's not like an Alabama player was running and then just dropped the ball and then the ball went in Oklahoma's direction and they fell on it. Oklahoma's defense carried them in this game, and really both defensive lines dominated in this game. But now the Iron Bowl has become a must-win for Alabama. And if it was in Tuscaloosa, I'd say it's a almost guaranteed win for them. But with it being in Auburn, it's far from a guaranteed win because even when Auburn's been bad, Alabama has struggled in Auburn. But even though Alabama has struggled in Auburn every time, they've only actually lost to Auburn when Auburn has been good. Now, all of that was under Nick Saban, but I would feel pretty good about Alabama winning the Iron Bowl. Oklahoma to get in the college football playoff will still have to win out. And with the rest of their games being against Missouri and LSU, it does seem very likely that Oklahoma will do that. But Oklahoma cannot get overconfident because they beat Alabama, or they will miss out on the college football playoff. Because at the same time last year, Ole Miss was 8-2, and uh, uh, coming off a win against Georgia, it looked like they were a sure thing to make the college football playoff, and then they got overconfident and lost to Florida. As an Ole Miss fan, I'm so glad they got revenge on last night. Florida, I'm not surprised that they played better than they did the week before, but this sure wasn't an easy win for Ole Miss. Their defense had a rough first half. because they actually made Dud Lagway look like he knows what he's doing. He completed a few deep balls on Ole Miss. And while Lagway does have a very strong throwing arm, he'll make one or two really good throws like that in a game, and then the rest of the game he's inaccurate, like he was in this game. And Ole Miss defensively let Florida run a lot on them in the first half. And I'm not surprised that Florida was able to run on them some because Jaden Ball is one of the best running backs in college football. And Florida does have a very experienced offensive line. And one of those Florida touchdowns you really can't blame on the Ole Miss defense because a stupid interception by Chambliss put Florida at first and goal. It's really hard to stop a team when they're first and goal at the beginning of the drive. But this interception by Chambliss was so stupid to the point that it looked like he thought the Florida defensive back was his wide receiver. But the Ole Miss defense played much better in the second half. They shut down the run and the pass. And there were two dumb coaching decisions, though, by Lane Kiffin in this game because there was one time where they were fourth and goal at the one and behind 24 to 20, and he goes for it and they don't convert. And while a field goal would have still had them behind, this was in the middle of the third quarter, so you always want to take the points at that time. And then there was another time just in the last few minutes of the game where Ole Miss was ahead at 27 to 24, and it's fourth and goal at the three, and Kiffin goes for it, and they don't convert. And while I know taking the field goal still wouldn't have put the game away, had he taken the field goal that other time and this time, they would have had the game put away then because they would have had a 9 point lead. These are the kinds of decisions that can destroy you in the college football playoff. But the star of this game was Kaiwan Lacey. I think he's Ole Miss's best player on the team this season. He had 31 carries for 224 yards and three touchdowns. Notre Dame, I do still think has the best running back in college football, but either Kaiwan Lacey or that running back at Missouri, Hardy, I would think is the second best. But the red zone has been the one problem with the Ole Miss offense. Their offense has always been very explosive and able to move the ball really well. But not just this year, last year too, and before that, when they've gotten in the red zone, they've had to settle for three or even get nothing because they go for it and don't convert too many times. Most of their touchdowns have to come from big plays. And while I didn't mind the red zone struggles against Oklahoma, it is kind of concerning against Florida because Florida doesn't have a great defense. But I watched Notre Dame play until it got out of hand. And like I expected, Notre Dame was way too much at the line of scrimmage for Pittsburgh to handle. And I think if Notre Dame can play to their ceiling in all four playoff games, like Ohio State did a year ago, they would actually have a chance to win the national championship. Because you can't really blame them for the Texas A&M loss because it was a 1 point loss to a 10-0 team. And Notre Dame, late in that game, it looked like was going to win it because it was a long fourth and goal for Texas A&M. And while they did convert and score the touchdown, had they not have converted, Notre Dame would have won that game. I think if there were to be a rematch, Notre Dame would have a really good chance to win it. And the Miami loss, it may have been because C.J. Carr was making his first ever college start, and Miami they had Carson Beck, who's a third year starter. But I think Notre Dame having C.J. Carr would give them a really good chance in the college football playoff because he's the best quarterback they've had in a long time. And at the college football playoff time, he'll pretty much be a sophomore with playing experience. But that'll be it with this video. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.